Dr. Kim Nari pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the observation deck. Through the thick glass, she could see the alien ship floating in the darkness of space like a giant silver knife. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Much bigger. Still gives you chills, doesn't it? Park Ji-ho walked up beside her. His engineering uniform was wrinkled from too many sleepless nights. 3 weeks since they showed up, and I still can't believe it's real. Nari nodded, but didn't look away from the ship. Something about it bothered her. The surface was completely smooth. No windows, no lights, no signs that living beings were inside. It looked more like a machine than a home. "The council wants us to go over there," she said quietly. "I know. Captain Do-hyun told me an hour ago." Ji-ho rubbed his tired eyes. "First contact with aliens, and they pick us lucky few to represent all of humanity." The message from the aliens had been simple, too simple. It came in perfect English, which should have been impossible. "Bring your brightest minds. We require specimens for study." The Earth Council had debated for days about what specimens meant. Most decided it was just a translation error. Nari wasn't so sure. The door to the observation deck slid open. Captain Lee Do-hyun walked in, followed by Dr. Choi Min-seo and Specialist Han Tae-jin. Do-hyun looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. "Final briefing in 1 hour," Do-hyun said. His voice was calm, but Nari could hear the tension underneath. "We launch tomorrow morning." "Any new information about them?" Min-seo asked. She was the team's language expert, and she'd been trying to decode the alien message for weeks. "Nothing. Useful," Do-hyun replied. "They call themselves the Velthari. They say they've traveled far to meet us. That's about it." "What about their ship?" Tae-jin spoke up. The young communications officer looked nervous. "Our scans can't see inside. It at all. Some kind of advanced shielding," Ji-ho explained. "Whatever technology they're using, it's way beyond ours." Nari finally turned away from the window. "Has anyone else noticed how cold their messages sound? Like they're talking about objects, not people." The others looked at her. Min-seo frowned. "What do you mean?" "Listen to the words again. Specimens for study. Not people to meet or beings to understand. Specimens. That's what scientists call lab rats." Do-hyun's jaw tightened. "The council thinks it's just their way of speaking. Different culture, different words." "Maybe," Nari said, but she didn't believe it. The next morning came too fast. Nari sat in the shuttle, watching Earth grow smaller behind them. She'd packed light, just her research equipment and personal items. The aliens had said the visit would last 2 weeks. Beside her, Ji-ho was checking his engineering tools for the 10th time. "Think they'll want to trade technology?" he asked. "I hope so," Tae-jin replied from across the small cabin. "Imagine what we could learn from them." Min-seo was reading through her language files. "I've prepared greetings in 50 different Earth languages. Hopefully I can figure out how their translation system works." Do-hyun sat at the front, quiet and alert. He'd brought a small military escort, but they were all carrying research equipment instead of weapons. The council had been very clear. This was a peaceful mission. As they got closer to the alien ship, Nari could see details that weren't visible from Earth. The surface wasn't just smooth. It was perfect. No scratches, no wear marks, no signs that it had traveled through space. It looked brand new. "How long do you think they've been traveling?" she asked Ji-ho. He studied the ship through the window. "Hard to say. Could be years, could be centuries. With that kind of technology, who knows?" The docking process was strange. No one guided them in, no radio chatter. The alien ship just opened a hole in its side, and their shuttle was pulled inside by some invisible force. The hole closed behind them with no sound at all. "Well," Do-hyun said, standing up and checking his equipment. "This is it. The docking bay was as smooth and perfect as the outside of the ship. White walls curved up into a white ceiling. The air that came through their shuttle's sensors was clean and odorless. There were no tools, no equipment, no signs that anyone worked here." "It's like a hospital," Min-seo whispered. Nari felt her stomach twist. That was exactly what it was like. A very clean, very empty hospital. A section of the wall slid open. 3 figures walked out. Nari's first thought was that they looked almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But there were differences. Their skin was gray and looked too smooth. Their eyes were large and dark. They moved in perfect sync, like dancers who had practiced the same routine 1,000 times. The middle figure spoke. The words came from a small device on its chest, not from its mouth. "Welcome, subjects. I am Science-Cast Morthek. You will follow." Nari exchanged glances with her team. Subjects, not guests, not visitors. Subjects. They walked through corridors that all looked the same. White walls, white floors, white ceiling. No decorations, no personal touches, no signs of individual lives. Every door they passed was closed. Nari wondered what was behind them. "Your facility is very clean," Minseo said, trying to start a conversation. "Contamination must be prevented," Morthek replied without looking back. "Contamination from what?" Do-hyun asked. "From subjects." The word hit Nari like a cold slap. They weren't guests here. They were contamination to be contained. Finally, they reached a large room with a high ceiling. In the center was a table, surrounded by chairs. But the chairs were wrong. They had straps, restraints. "Please sit," Morthek said. "I think we'll stand," Do-hyun replied firmly. 2 more Velthari entered the room. These ones were bigger, with darker skin and no translation. Devices. Guards, Nari realized. "Please sit," Morthek repeated. It wasn't a request anymore. They sat. Nari's hands shook as she gripped the armrests of her chair. The Velthari didn't sit. They stood around the table like doctors around an operating table. "You are the 48th species we have studied," Morthek began. "Each species contributes unique qualities to our understanding. You will do the same." "What kind of study?" Minseo asked. Her voice was steady, but Nari could see fear in her eyes. "Complete biological and psychological analysis. Your species shows promising indicators. High aggression combined with pack-bonding behaviors. Adaptable technology development. You will make excellent additions to our collection." The room went silent. Nari felt the blood drain from her face. Collection. They weren't here for first. Contact. They weren't here for cultural exchange. They were here to be collected. Additions to what collection? Do-hyun's voice was dangerously quiet. "Our empire consists of 47 conquered species. Each provides specialized labor based on their biological and psychological characteristics. Humans will serve as soldier slaves after proper conditioning." Ji-ho made a strangled sound. Tae-jin went completely white. Minseo started to stand up, but one of the guards stepped forward. "This is a mistake," Nari said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "We came here for peaceful contact, to learn from each other." Morthek tilted its head like a bird studying an insect. "Subject confusion is normal. You will be provided with all necessary information during processing." Processing. The word made Nari's skin crawl. "What happened to the other 47 species?" she asked. "They serve their designated functions efficiently. Resistance was eliminated through proper conditioning techniques." Nari looked around at her team. Do-hyun's hand was slowly moving toward his sidearm. Ji-ho was staring at the table like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Minseo was taking deep breaths, probably trying not to panic. Tae-jin looked like he might throw up. They had walked into a trap. The Earth Council had sent them to make history. Instead, they had become specimens in an alien laboratory. But as she looked at her friends, Nari felt something else besides fear. Anger. Pure, burning anger at these creatures who looked at humans and saw only tools to be used. The Velthari had made their first mistake. They thought humans were just another species to be catalogued and broken. They had no idea what they had just awakened. The room they were given had 5 beds and no windows. The walls were the same perfect white as everything else on the ship. Nari sat on the edge of her bed and watched Tae-jin pace back and forth like a caged animal. "This can't be real," he kept saying. "This can't be happening." "It's real," Do-hyun said quietly. He was sitting on his own bed, cleaning his sidearm. "The question is what we do about it." What can we do? Jiho asked. He was lying flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. We're on their ship, surrounded by their people, with their technology. Minseo was taking notes in a small book. I've been thinking about their language patterns, she said. The way they talk about us. It's not random. They've done this before. Many times. Nari nodded. 47 species. That's what they said. 47 different races of people, all turned into slaves. Don't say that word, Taejin snapped. Don't even think it. Why not? Nari stood up and faced him. That's what they plan to do to us, to Earth, to everyone we've ever known. Saying it out loud doesn't make it more true. The door slid open. 2 guards entered, followed by Morthek. The aliens moved with that same perfect coordination, like parts of a machine. Subject Nari, you will come. Nari's heart started pounding, but she kept her face calm. Where? For initial evaluation. Do-hyun started to stand. She's not going anywhere alone. One of the guards pointed a device at him. It looked like a weapon. Subject Do-hyun will remain. Interference is not permitted. Nari put a hand on Do-hyun's shoulder. It's okay, I'll be fine. She wasn't fine, she was terrified. But she wouldn't let them see it. They led her through more white corridors to a room filled with strange machines, tables with restraints, devices with blinking lights, screens showing images she didn't understand. Lie down, Morthek instructed, pointing to a table in the center. I prefer to stand. Subject compliance is required. The guards moved closer. Nari realized she had no choice. She lay down on the cold metal table. Restraints clicked into place around her wrists and ankles. Don't be afraid, Morthek said as it began attaching sensors to her head. Pain will be minimal. I'm not afraid, Nari lied. Heart rate indicates otherwise. Interesting. Your species shows strong deception behaviors even under stress. More Velthari entered the room. They moved around her like doctors performing surgery, checking machines and taking readings, but their eyes weren't looking at her like she was a person. They looked at her like she was a lab rat, subject shows. Excellent physical condition, one of them said. Muscle development appropriate for combat applications. Brain activity patterns indicate high intelligence and problem-solving capability, another added. Suitable for technical labor assignments. Morthek leaned over her. Its large, dark eyes reflected the lights from the machines. Tell me about your emotional attachment to your species. What? Other subjects? The ones who came with you? How much distress would their suffering cause you? Nari felt ice in her veins. Why do you want to know that? Pack bonding behaviors are useful for motivation and control. Subjects who care about other subjects can be managed through threat and reward systems. The casual way it talked about torturing her friends made Nari's vision go red. She pulled against the restraints, but they didn't budge. You're monsters, she said through gritted teeth. Incorrect. We are efficient. Your species will serve valuable functions in our empire. Your aggression will be channeled into military applications. Your pack bonding will ensure loyalty through mutual dependency. Your technological adaptability will allow rapid training for specialized tasks. We're not tools for you to use. Morthek tilted its head. Define use versus purpose. All biological entities serve functions within larger systems. We simply optimize those functions. We're people. We have families, dreams, lives that matter. Irrelevant concepts. Function is what matters. You will serve your function. They kept her on the table for hours, scanning her brain, testing her reflexes, taking samples of her blood and hair, all while discussing her like she wasn't there. Reproductive capability appears standard for the species. Bone density suggests good durability for physical labor. Stress responses indicate high pain tolerance. When they finally released her, Nari could barely walk. Not because of physical damage, but because of the crushing weight of being treated like an object. She stumbled back to their room where her friends were waiting. What did they do to you? Do-hyun demanded, checking her for injuries. Tests, Nari said, collapsing onto her bed. Medical tests, psychological tests. They know everything about us now. What kind of everything? Minseo asked. Nari closed her eyes. They know we care about each other. They plan to use that against... Us. Over the next 3 days, they took each member of the team for similar evaluations. Jiho came back pale and shaking. Min-seo returned with tears in her eyes that she tried to hide. Taijin couldn't speak for hours after his session. Do-hyun was gone the longest. When he came back, there was dried blood on his shirt. They wanted to test my combat responses, he said simply. I gave them some data. Did you hurt any of them? Jiho asked. I tried. Their armor is very good, but it was what happened to Taijin that broke something inside all of them. They brought him back unconscious. When he woke up, he could barely remember his own name. The young man who had been nervous but eager was gone. In his place was someone who flinched at sudden movements and stared at walls for hours. Memory modification experiment, Morthek explained when Nari demanded answers. Subject resistance was higher than expected. Adjustments will be made for future procedures. Nari knelt beside Taejin's bed and held his hand. He looked at her with confused eyes. Do I know you? He asked. Yes, she whispered. You know me. That night, while the others slept, Nari lay awake planning. The Velthari thought they understood humans. They had their data, their measurements, their psychological profiles. They thought they knew exactly what they were dealing with. They were wrong. Yes, humans cared about each other. Yes, that could be used as a weakness. But it could also be something else. Something the Velthari, with their perfect efficiency and cold logic, couldn't understand. It could be strength. Do-hyun, she whispered. I'm awake. We need to talk. All of us. Quietly, carefully, they woke Jiho and Min-seo. Taijin was still staring at the ceiling, but he listened too. They think they have us figured out, Nari said softly. But they've made a mistake. They're looking at us like we're just another species in their collection. They don't understand what makes humans different. What makes us different? Jiho asked. We don't break the way they expect us to. Do-hyun leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to show them what happens when you cage the wrong animal. Min-seo looked scared. Nari, they have technology we can't imagine. They've conquered 47 species. Maybe those other species tried to fight them with strength or technology, Nari replied. Maybe they tried to be logical about it. But humans aren't logical when you threaten the people we care about. She looked around at her friends. At Taijin, who was slowly remembering who he was. At Jiho, who had always been able to fix anything. At Min-seo, who understood how minds worked. At Do-hyun, who had never backed down from a fight in his life. They want to study us? Fine. Let's give them something to study. Outside their room, in the perfect white corridors of the Velthari ship, sensors recorded their conversation. Morthek would analyze their words later, looking for useful data about human psychology. It would find the data very confusing. According to all their models, the subjects should be broken by now. Instead, they seemed to be planning something. The Velthari had made their second mistake. They had assumed that because they could analyze human behavior, they could predict it. They had no idea what was coming. The tests got worse. Nari found herself in a small white room with no furniture except a chair. The lights were too bright, then too dim, then too bright again. Voices spoke to her in languages she didn't understand, then in English with words. That made no sense. Compliance brings comfort, the voice said over and over. Resistance brings pain. You are valuable, you will serve. Compliance brings comfort. She knew what they were trying to do. Break down her mind, make her accept their control. She'd read about these techniques in her xenobiology studies. Sensory manipulation, sleep deprivation, repetitive messaging. The problem was, it was working. After 18 hours in the room, Nari started to wonder if fighting back was really worth it. Maybe serving the Velthari wouldn't be so bad. Maybe resistance really did just bring pain. Then she remembered Taejin's confused face asking if he knew her. Go to hell, she said out loud. The voice paused for a moment. Then it continued. Compliance brings comfort. Resistance brings pain. When they finally let her out, she was exhausted and shaky. But she was still angry. That was important. As long as she stayed angry, she could think clearly. Jiho was taken to a room full of broken machines. "Fix these," Morthek told him. "Demonstrate your technical capabilities." Jiho looked at the devices. Some were clearly Velthari technology. Others looked like they came from different species, probably some of the other 47 civilizations. "What happens if I can't fix them?" he asked. "Then you will experience negative reinforcement until your performance improves." Jiho understood. Fix the machines or be tortured. He started working. But as he examined the devices, he began to understand something important. The Velthari. Technology was advanced, but it wasn't magic. It followed rules. And if it followed rules, it could be broken. He fixed the machines they gave him, but he also memorized everything he could about how they worked. Mincio was put in a room with recordings of alien languages, dozens of different voices speaking hundreds of different words. The Velthari wanted her to learn their empire's communication. "Systems. You will serve as a translator for newly acquired species," Morthek explained. "Your linguistic abilities are highly valued." Minseo listened to the recordings, but she also listened to the way the Velthari spoke to each other when they thought she wasn't paying attention. She started to understand their rank system, their protocols, their weaknesses. Du Hyun's tests were more direct. They put him in combat simulations against holographic enemies. When he won, they made the enemy stronger. When he lost, they hurt him and made him try again. "Your species shows excellent warrior potential," Morthek observed, as Do-hyun fought against 3 opponents at once. "Aggression, tactical thinking, refusal to surrender, very useful traits." Do-hyun said nothing, but he was learning too. Learning how the Velthari fought, how they moved, how they thought about combat. Every simulation taught him something new about his captors. Tae-jin was the hardest to watch. They brought him back to their room each day more confused than before. Sometimes he remembered who they were. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he spoke in the Velthari language without realizing it. "Memory modification shows promising results," Morthek noted during one of their daily observations. "Subject personality can be adjusted for optimal compliance." But even through the fog of mental manipulation, Tae-jin was fighting. Nari could see it in his eyes during his clearer moments. The real Tae-jin was still in there, buried but not destroyed. On the 4th day, something changed. Nari was in her sensory deprivation room when the voice stopped mid-sentence. The lights went out completely. Then emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in red. An alarm started blaring. When the guards came to get her, they were moving faster than usual. Their perfect coordination was slightly off. Something had surprised them. Back in their room, the others were already waiting. Do-hyun had a cut on his forehead and looked angry. Jiho was grinning despite everything. "What happened?" Nari asked. "I may have caused a small electrical fire in their engineering section," Jiho said. "Accidentally, of course." "How accidentally?" Minseo asked. "About as accidentally as Do-hyun accidentally punched that guard in the face." Do-hyun shrugged. "He got too close during the simulation. I was defending myself." Nari felt hope for the first time in days. "You fought back." "We all did," Minseo said. "I've been giving them wrong translations. Small ones, but enough to confuse their communications. And I've been remembering things," Tae-jin said quietly. His voice was clearer than it had been since the memory experiments. "They can change what I remember, but they can't change who I am underneath." Nari looked around at her friends. They were bruised, exhausted, and scared, but they weren't broken. The Velthari had tried to categorize them, control them, reshape them into useful tools. Instead, they had created something the aliens had never encountered before. A group of humans with nothing left to lose. "They're going to get more aggressive now," Do-hyun warned. "They know we're fighting back." "Good," Nari said. "Let them get aggressive. Let them show us what they're really like." She was right. The next morning, Morthek came to their room with 4 guards instead of 2. "Subject cooperation has been insufficient," it announced. "New protocols will be implemented." They separated the team. Each person was taken to a different section of the ship. Nari found herself in a cell barely large enough to stand in. The walls pressed in on all sides. "Isolation will continue until compliance improves," Morthek's voice said through a speaker. Your companions are experiencing similar conditioning. Their suffering can end when you choose to cooperate. This was the Velthari's real strategy. They had studied human pack bonding behavior. They knew humans would sacrifice themselves to protect others, but they had misunderstood something crucial about that behavior. Yes, humans would sacrifice for each other, but they would also fight harder when their pack was threatened. Nari pressed her hands against the walls of her cell and smiled grimly. The Velthari thought they were breaking her down. Instead, they were just making her more dangerous. In his own cell, Jiho was using his fingernails to scratch symbols into the metal walls. Technical specifications, electrical diagrams, everything he had learned about Velthari technology. In her cell, Minseo was reciting every alien phrase she had memorized, looking for patterns and weaknesses in their communication systems. In his cell, Do-hyun was doing push-ups and planning battle tactics for scenarios with no weapons and overwhelming odds. In his cell, Tae-jin was fighting to remember everything the memory modification had tried to erase. Every detail about Earth, about their mission, about who he really was. The Velthari monitored them all. They recorded everything, analyzed every word and action. Their data showed that isolation was having the desired effect. The subjects were becoming more focused, more determined. The Velthari interpreted this as progress toward compliance. They were wrong again. After 3 days of isolation, they brought the team back together. Morthek wanted to observe their reunion, to study how humans reconnected after forced separation. Your individual conditioning shows improvement, it announced, as they sat once again at the table with restraints. Group dynamics will now be evaluated. Nari looked at her friends. They all looked tired, but their eyes were sharp. Alert. Ready. We've been thinking, she said to Morthek. Subjects are not required to think, only to comply. That's your problem right there, Nari continued. You think you understand us because you can measure us. But you're missing the most important thing about humans. Explain. Nari smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We get creative when you back us into a corner. The lights went out. In the darkness, Jiho's voice called out, Now! Emergency power kicked, just in time to show Morthek that its test subjects had vanished. The Velthari had made their third mistake. They had assumed that because they could control human bodies, they could control human minds. They were about to learn the difference between compliance and surrender, and they were about to discover what happened when you gave a group of angry humans time to plan. The maintenance tunnels inside the Velthari ship were not designed for humans. They were barely wide enough to crawl through, and the air was stale and hot. But they were also unmonitored. Nari pulled herself forward on her elbows, following Jiho through the narrow space. Behind her, she could hear Minseo breathing hard and Do-hyun muttering curses under his breath. Tae-jin brought up the rear, moving quietly despite his injuries. How much further? She whispered. 2 more sections, Jiho replied softly. Then we'll be at the main communication array. It had taken them weeks to plan this, weeks of pretending to be broken while secretly gathering information. Jiho had memorized the ship's layout during his technical tests. Minseo had learned the Velthari command codes. Do-hyun had figured out their security patterns. Tae-jin had been their messenger, carrying information between them during the brief moments when the guards weren't watching, and Nari had been planning something. That would change everything. They reached a junction where several tunnels met. Jiho held up his hand for them to stop. Through a grate in the floor, they could see into the corridor below. 2 guards walked past, their footsteps perfectly synchronized. Pattern 7, Do-hyun whispered. Right on schedule. The Velthari were predictable. That was their weakness. They had optimized everything for efficiency, which meant they did everything the same way every time. Once you learned their patterns, you could predict their movements down to the second. They waited for the guards to pass, then continued crawling. Nari's knees were raw from the rough metal surfaces, but she ignored the pain. They were almost there. The communication center was a large room filled with screens and control panels. It was the heart of the Velthari ship's information systems. From here, they could send messages to anywhere in their empire. Jiho had found a way to access it through the maintenance tunnels. a forgotten panel that connected to the main systems for repair purposes. It would only work for a few minutes before security detected the intrusion, but a few minutes was all Nari needed. They dropped down from the ceiling into the empty room. The night shift was smaller, and this section was only lightly guarded. Jiho immediately went to work on the control panel, his fingers flying over. Alien symbols he had memorized. "I'm in," he whispered. "But not for long. They'll detect this in about 3 minutes." Nari moved to the main communication array. The interface was different from human technology, but Minseo had taught her the basic commands. "Can you access their empire-wide network?" "Already done. You're connected to every Velthari ship and colony in the galaxy." Nari took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would either save humanity or doom them all. She activated the recording system and began to speak. "My name is Dr. Kim Nari. I am a human being from the planet Earth. I am speaking to you from inside a Velthari ship where my people are being held as prisoners." Her voice echoed through the communications center. Somewhere in the ship's systems, her words were being translated into 47 different languages and broadcast across an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. "The Velthari came to our world claiming they wanted to study us. They called us specimens. They told us we would make good slaves after proper conditioning." Minseo was watching the door, ready to warn them if guards approached. Do Hyun was setting up their escape route. Tai Jin was monitoring the ship's internal communications, listening for signs that they had been discovered. Nari continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They have done this before. 47 times. 47 different species, all conquered and enslaved, all reduced to tools in their empire, but they made a mistake when they chose humanity." An alarm started blaring in the distance. Red lights flashed on the control panels. "They're on to us," Jiho said urgently. 30 seconds. Nari spoke faster, knowing this might be her only chance to reach the galaxy. "They think they understand us because they can measure our bodies and analyze our brains. But they don't understand what makes humans human. They don't understand that we are the species that looks at the impossible and says, 'Watch me.' We are the species that turns our greatest disasters into our greatest triumphs." The sound of running footsteps echoed from the corridors outside. "We are the species that will never, ever bow to bullies and slavers. You want to study human nature? Then study this. We remember every person you have enslaved. We remember every world you have conquered. We remember every life you have destroyed in the name of efficiency." The door to the communication center burst open. Velthari guards poured in, weapons raised, "And we are coming for you," Nari finished. "All of you!" Do-hyun tackled the first guard through the door. Minseo threw a tool at another one's weapon. Tai Jin, despite his injuries, grabbed a guard's arm and twisted it with surprising strength. But there were too many of them. Within seconds, the humans were surrounded and captured. Morthek entered the room, flanked by more guards. Its large dark eyes showed no emotion, but Nari could tell it was angry. "Subject Nari, you have violated containment protocols." "Good," Nari replied. Blood was running from a cut on her lip, but she was smiling. "How many ships heard that message?" "Communications will be contained. Your actions will have no effect." "Really? Then why do you look worried?" Morthek stepped closer. "Subjects do not possess the capability to affect Empire operations. We just did. That message went out to every world in your empire, every conquered species, every slave world. They all heard a human say that we remember them." "Memories are irrelevant. Functions are what matter," Nari laughed. It was not a sound Morthek had heard from any subject before. It was not fear or despair or compliance. It was something else entirely. "You really don't understand, do you? You can conquer people, but you can't conquer hope. And that's what we just gave them. Hope." Morthek was quiet for a moment. Then it spoke into its communication device. "Overlord Zendara, we have a situation." Minutes later, they were brought before the ship's commander. Overlord Zendara was larger than the other Velthari, with darker skin and more elaborate clothing. Its presence filled the room like a cold wind. "Subject Nari," it said, its translated voice carrying an edge that made Nari's skin crawl. "You have committed an act of rebellion against the Velthari Empire." "I've committed an act of communication," Nari replied. "I told the truth." "Truth is irrelevant. Order is what matters. You have disrupted order. Good. Your order is built on slavery and murder. It deserves to be disrupted. Zendara studied her with those dark eyes. Your species will pay for this action. We will return to your world with 1,000 ships. We will make your people suffer for your defiance. Nari met its gaze without flinching. You can try, but you made one crucial mistake in your analysis of humans. Explain. You studied us as individuals, but humans are strongest when we're united, and you just gave every human in the galaxy a reason to unite. She smiled again, and this time, there was something in her expression that made even Zendara step back. You wanted specimens to study? Congratulations. You've just turned humanity into the most dangerous specimen in the galaxy. We know who you are now, we know what you do, and we know you can be beaten. Your world will burn, Zendara said. Maybe. But yours will burn first, and every slave, world you've conquered, will remember who lit the match. The Overlord was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke to its guards. Return them to containment, maximum security protocols. Prepare the ship for immediate departure to their home world. As they were dragged away, Nari called back over her shoulder. See you at Earth, Zendara. We'll be ready for you. In their reinforced cell, surrounded by guards and security systems, the 5 humans sat together in the darkness. Think it worked? Jiho asked quietly. It worked, Minseo said. I monitored the transmission. It reached every corner of their empire before they could cut it off. What happens now? Taejin asked. His memory was still damaged, but his voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Now we go home, Do-hyun said grimly. And we prepare for war. Nari leaned back against the cold wall. Somewhere in the galaxy, 47 enslaved species had heard a human voice telling them they were not forgotten. Somewhere in space, the Velthari fleet was preparing to crush humanity before the rebellion could spread. And somewhere on Earth, her message was being received and analyzed by people who would understand exactly what it meant. The experiment was over. The real test was about to begin. The security cell was supposed to be escape-proof. Triple-locked doors, constant surveillance, guards posted every few meters. The Velthari had designed it to hold the most dangerous prisoners in their empire. They had never held humans before. Nari sat in the corner, apparently meditating with her eyes closed. Actually, she was counting. Counting the guards' footsteps, timing their patrol patterns, measuring the slight electrical hum that came from the door locks every few minutes, across. From her, Jiho was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. To the cameras, he looked defeated. In reality, he was studying the ventilation system above them, noting how the metal panels connected and where the support struts were weakest. Minseo was writing in her notebook. The guards thought she was keeping a diary. She was actually transcribing every Velthari conversation she had overheard, building a complete picture of their ship's command structure and security protocols. Do-hyun appeared to be sleeping. His breathing was slow and steady, his body completely relaxed. But his ears were tracking every sound in the corridor outside, cataloging the weapons the guards carried and their response times. Taejin was the key to everything. His memory damage had an unexpected benefit. The Velthari monitoring systems couldn't predict his behavior because his brain patterns kept changing. He could move around the cell, test the walls and floor, examine the locks, all while appearing to be confused and harmless. On the 3rd day of maximum security, Taejin found what they needed. There's a maintenance access under my bed, he whispered during one of his clearer moments. Hidden under a false panel. The metal is thinner there. Can you get through it? Do-hyun asked softly. Not me, but someone smaller could. They all looked at Minseo. She was the smallest member of the team, and her linguistic skills would be crucial for what came next. I can fit, she said, but what about the rest of you? You don't need to get us out, Nari said. You just need to cause enough chaos for us to get ourselves out. That night, while the ship's systems ran their automated maintenance cycles, Minseo squeezed through the hidden panel. The space beneath the cell was cramped and dark, filled with pipes and electrical conduits that Jiho had taught her to recognize. She crawled through the mechanical spaces, following the route they had planned. First to the ship's internal communication system, then to the environmental controls, finally to the hangar bay where their shuttle was being held. At each stop, she did exactly what they had discussed. The first sign of trouble came when the ship's internal announcements started broadcasting in the wrong languages. Maintenance orders given in the tongue of a conquered species from the outer rim, navigation updates spoken in the ceremonial language of an ancient civilization that the Velthari had wiped out centuries ago. The effect was immediate chaos. Guards scrambled to understand orders they couldn't translate. Officers shouted conflicting instructions. The perfect efficiency of the Velthari system ground to a confused halt. The second sign came when the environmental controls began cycling between different atmospheric preferences. The air grew thick and humid, like the homeworld of the Cathara species. Then thin and cold, like the mountains of Velnox Prime. Then heavy with gases that made Velthari breathing difficult, but were perfectly normal for the Zephyrian people. Throughout the ship, enslaved workers from dozens of different species suddenly found themselves breathing their home air for the first time in years. Some of them began to remember what it felt like to be free. The third sign was when every door in the ship unlocked simultaneously. Nari was ready. The moment she heard the locks disengage, she was moving. Du Hyun was right behind her, followed by Jiho and Tae Jin. The corridor outside their cell was full of confused guards trying to understand what was happening. They saw the humans emerge and raised their weapons, but Do Hyun was already among them. The Velthari were efficient fighters, but they fought like machines. Predictable movements, standard tactics, optimal strategies. Do Hyun fought like a human, unpredictable, adaptive, willing to take hits in order to deal damage. He grabbed the first guard's weapon and used it as a club against the second. When the third guard tried to flank him, Jiho threw a piece of broken ceiling panel that knocked the alien off balance. Tae Jin, his memories still scattered but his instincts intact, tackled another guard with surprising ferocity. Nari ran past the fighting, heading for the ship's main computer core. She had a virus to plant, not a digital virus, something much more dangerous. A truth virus. She reached the central databanks where the Velthari stored information about their conquered species. 47 civilizations reduced to files of useful characteristics and recommended applications. The Zephyrians were listed as aerial reconnaissance specialists. The Cathara were classified as aquatic labor units. The humans were marked as pending classification, soldier-slave potential. Nari accessed the database and began making changes. Small ones at first, but important ones. Where the files said conquered species, she changed it to enslaved peoples. Where they said labor units, she wrote prisoners. Where they listed useful characteristics, she added stolen potential. Then she added something new to every file, a message in each species' own language. You are remembered. You are not forgotten. You are people, not tools. But the most important change was in the Velthari's own tactical database. She found their military analysis of the 47 conquered worlds and added a new entry. Species name, human. Status, dangerous. Recommendation, avoid. Note, highly unpredictable when threatened. Pack bonding behavior makes them stronger, not weaker. Memory of injustice creates permanent hostility. Previous conquest attempts by similar empires have resulted in total defeat. Recommend immediate withdrawal from human space. She uploaded the analysis to every Velthari ship in the fleet. Meanwhile, throughout the vessel, Min Seo's environmental changes were having an effect beyond simple chaos. Slaves who had spent years breathing alien air suddenly found themselves thinking more clearly. Workers who had been drugged into compliance through atmospheric controls began to remember who they used to be, and they began to fight back. It started small. A Cathara maintenance worker who refused to repair a damaged system, a Zephyrian navigator who gave the wrong coordinates, a dozen different species all choosing the same moment to say no. The rebellion spread through the ship like wildfire. Guards found themselves facing not just escaped human prisoners, but revolts on every deck. The Velthari's perfect order collapsed into beautiful chaos. Nari made her way to the hangar bay, dodging patrols and slipping through corridors full of smoke and confusion. She found Min Seo already there, working on their shuttle systems. Engines are ready, Min Seo reported, but I can't get the hangar doors open. They're on manual lockdown. I can fix that, Jiho said, arriving with the others. Du Hyun was bleeding from several cuts, but he was grinning. How many guards did you fight? Nari asked. Not enough, he replied. Jiho went to work on the hangar controls while the others prepared the shuttle. Through the hangar's observation windows, they could see the battle raging throughout the ship. Velthari security forces were fighting. Pitched battles against rebels in every corridor. Got it, Jiho announced. The massive hangar doors began to open, revealing the star-filled darkness of space. They ran for their shuttle as alarms blared and emergency lights flashed. Behind them, Velthari guards poured into the hangar bay, weapons firing. Energy bolts sizzled past their heads as they dove through the shuttle's open door. Do-hyun slammed the controls, and their small ship shot out into space like a bullet from a gun. Behind them, the Velthari vessel was chaos. Explosions flickered along its hull as internal fighting raged. Other ships in the fleet were moving to contain the rebellion, but the virus Nari had planted was spreading through their networks, carrying her message to every corner of the Empire. "They're following us," Minseo announced, watching the tactical display. 3. Velthari pursuit ships had launched from the main vessel, moving fast to intercept them. "Can we outrun them?" Taejin asked. "Not in this bucket," Jiho replied, pushing their engines to maximum. "But we don't need to outrun them. We just need to get to the jump point." The chase lasted 20 minutes. Energy weapons lit up the darkness as the Velthari ships tried to disable their shuttle without destroying it. They wanted their prisoners back alive. But Nari had one last surprise. As they approached the jump coordinates that would take them back toward Earth, she activated the shuttle's communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Dr. Kim Nari, transmitting from Velthari space. The rebellion has begun. Repeat, the rebellion has begun. Every enslaved world, every conquered species, every person held against their will. You are not alone. Humanity remembers you. Humanity is coming for you." The jump drive engaged just as the Velthari ships closed in. The shuttle vanished into hyperspace, carrying its message back toward human space. Overlord Zendara stood on the bridge of its flagship, watching the chaos unfold. Half its fleet was dealing with rebellions on their own ships. The other half was trying to contain uprisings on slave worlds throughout the Empire. "Overlord," Morthek reported, its voice strained. "The humans' virus has corrupted our entire database. Every tactic." 6 months after the escape, Nari stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the edge of the solar system through the main display. Any moment now, the Velthari fleet would appear. Intelligence suggested they were bringing 1,000 ships. Humanity was ready for them. "Final count, Admiral," Captain Park Jiho reported from his station. He wore the uniform of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Corps now, his engineers' expertise having proved invaluable in preparing their defenses. 800 defensive platforms online, Admiral Lee Do-hyun replied. 200 ships of the line ready for deployment. Planetary shields at maximum power. Nari smiled grimly. The titles were new, but her friends were the same people who had crawled through alien ventilation shafts to escape captivity. Do-hyun had been the obvious choice to lead Earth's military response. His experience fighting the Velthari made him invaluable. "What about our secret weapons?" she asked. Dr. Choi Minseo looked up from her console. "The liberation signals are ready for broadcast. Every frequency, every language. If there are slaves on those ships, they'll hear our message." Specialist. Han Tae-jin nodded from his position at communications. His memory had mostly returned during the months of preparation, though he still had gaps. "Transmission systems are standing by, Dr. Nari." Nari was no longer just a xenobiologist. Earth's government had given her a new title, Director of Alien Psychology and Counterintelligence. Her job was to understand how the enemy thought and find ways to disrupt their thinking. She had become very good at it. "Dr. Nari," a technician called out. "We're getting the first sensor readings, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system edge." "How many?" Do-hyun asked. "Still counting, sir. At least 600 so far. No, 800. Still more coming." Nari watched the tactical display as red dots appeared at the edge of the solar system. Each dot represented a ship full of enslaved beings forced to fight for their captors. The sight made her heart ache and her anger burn in equal measure. 1,200 ships total, the technician reported. "They've brought everything they have." "Good," Nari said quietly. "That means when we beat them, We beat them, all at once. The Velthari fleet began moving toward Earth in perfect formation. No hesitation, no scouting, no attempts at communication. They had come to make an example, and they saw no need for subtlety. But they were about to learn that 6 months was a long time for humans to prepare. "Admiral," another technician reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet." "Put it through," Do-hyun ordered. Overlord Zendara's translated voice filled the command center. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender immediately and submit to processing. Your defiance has infected our empire with disorder. This ends now." Do-hyun activated the reply channel. "This is Admiral Lee Do-hyun of the Earth Defense Force. We have a counteroffer. Surrender now, and we'll consider letting your slaves live. When we free them." There was a pause. Then Zendara's voice returned, colder than before. "Your world will burn." "Promises, promises," Do-hyun replied, and cut the channel. Nari stepped forward to the main communication console. "Minseo, are you ready?" "Ready, Dr. Nari. Then let's remind the galaxy what freedom sounds like." Minseo activated the Liberation broadcast. Across every frequency, in 47 different languages, the same message began transmitting toward the Velthari fleet, people of the conquered worlds, slaves of the Velthari Empire. This is Earth calling. We remember you. We remember your names, your histories, your cultures. You are not tools. You are not property. You are people, and people deserve to be free. The message continued, but Nari was watching the tactical display. The Velthari formation was still perfect, still advancing. But something was changing. "I'm reading power fluctuations in their fleet," Jiho reported. "Small ones, but spread across multiple ships." "Internal systems?" Do-hyun asked. "Looks like, yay. Communications disruptions, navigation errors, weapon systems going offline and coming back up," Nari nodded. "The slaves are fighting back. Every time they hear our broadcast, more of them remember who they used to be." On the lead Velthari ship, Overlord Zendara was experiencing this firsthand. "Science Cast Morthek, report. Internal difficulties throughout the fleet, Overlord. The human broadcast is causing behavioral anomalies in our labor units. Suppress the broadcast. We have tried. They are using frequencies and methods we cannot block without disabling our own communications. Then proceed with the attack. Destroy their world before the contamination spreads further." But as the fleet moved closer to Earth, the problems got worse. Enslaved technicians began sabotaging their own ships. Forced soldiers refused orders or fired in the wrong directions. Navigation specialists provided incorrect coordinates. The perfect Velthari formation began to break apart. "Now," Nari said. Earth's defenses activated all at once. The planet had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, and they had not wasted time. Orbital platforms fired weapons based on captured Velthari technology. Defense ships launched with tactics designed specifically to counter alien strategies. But the real surprise was what happened next. "Admiral, I'm reading new contacts," a technician announced. "Ships dropping out of hyperspace behind the Velthari fleet." "Identification?" "Unknown designs, sir." "Wait. They're broadcasting on liberation frequencies. It's the freed slaves from the Velthari ships we escaped from 6 months ago." Nari felt her heart soar. The rebellion had spread beyond just the ships she had infected. Entire worlds had risen up, stolen ships, and come to help defend Earth. The Cathara had brought their waterworld technologies. The Zephyrians had air superiority fighters. Dozens of other species had contributed ships, weapons, and most importantly, knowledge of how to fight the Velthari. "This is Commander Kelthis of the Free Cathara Fleet," came a new voice over the communications. "Earth friends, we have come to repay the debt. Your Nari reminded us of our names. Now we fight beside you." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Velthari had superior numbers and technology, but they were fighting a coalition of species who knew their weaknesses. Former slaves who understood their systems. Rebels who had no intention of ever being conquered again, and at the center of it all, humans fought with the desperate creativity that had always been their greatest strength. Nari watched the battle unfold from the command center, coordinating liberation broadcasts and psychological warfare. Every time a Velthari ship's systems were disrupted by slave revolts, she sent targeted messages to encourage the rebels. Ship 774, this is Dr. Nari. The beings on your lower decks are called Vorthak. Tell them Keth Morthailan. It means remember the stars in their language. Tell them their home world, Vorthkata, still remembers them. The response was immediate. Ship 774's weapons turned on the vessels beside it before its main reactor went critical. Ship 218, the forced laborers in your engine room are Solari. Tell them Velhan Kes Mora. The song continues. Tell them their children are still singing the old songs. Another ship broke formation, its crew in open revolt. Du Hyun's tactical genius, Jiho's technical expertise, Minseo's linguistic skills, and Tai Jin's communications mastery all played crucial roles. But it was Nari's understanding of what it meant to be enslaved, and what it meant to remember freedom, that turned the tide. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Velthari Empire had effectively ceased to exist. Most of their ships were destroyed, captured, or had joined the rebellion. The few that escaped carried the news back to the core worlds. The slaves remembered their names now, and they would never forget again. Overlord Zendara's ship was one of the few to escape. As it limped away from Earth, damaged and defeated, Nari sent one final message on the frequency she knew it would be monitoring. Zendara, this is Dr. Kim Nari. I told you we'd be ready. The response came back immediately. This is not over, human. You're right, Nari replied. It's not over. It's just beginning. Every world you've enslaved now knows they can be free. Every species you've conquered now remembers their real names. Your empire is finished, Zendara. The only question is how long it takes to fall completely. She paused, then added with quiet satisfaction. And just so you know, we keep our promises. We're coming for every slave world, every prison ship, every being you've ever held captive. That's not a threat. It's a declaration of intent. The communication channel went silent. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. The liberation broadcasts continued, reaching every corner of the former Velthari Empire. World after world rose in rebellion. Species after species reclaimed their freedom. The humans had kept their word. They remembered. They fought. They freed. Not just themselves, but everyone. Nari stood once again at the observation deck, looking out at the stars. But now the view was different. Ships from 47 different species moved through human space. Not as conquerors or slaves, but as allies and friends. Jiho joined her at the window. Think it's really over? The Velthari? Yes. But there are other empires out there. Other species that think they can conquer and enslave. And? Nari smiled, and it was the same expression that had once made Overlord Zendara step back in fear. And they're going to learn the